Interlink Enterprise Collaboration Center from December 2007 through June of 2010. ICES provides Interlink and Intellipedia search and discovery for instant messaging for the intelligence community and DoD blogs, iVideo, and a host of other services and collaboration tools to the community. And to Richard's right is Darren Murray, the director of the ISS LOB at Health and Human Services.
Oh, thanks.
Dara has been working in the federal government for 25 years, the last 10 with PSC. Her first job was at the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, writing a security plan, security plan for Security Operations Center right after the 3 Mile Island nuclear disaster. She later worked in security programs at the Department of Justice, National Science Foundation, and the Smithsonian Institute. She was a federal agent for the Department of Justice, FBI, for 11.5 years. I did not know that.
Yep.
She managed a program and wrote a security plan for an investigation into a $40 billion organized crime excise tax case, which led to indictments of several people involved. And with that, I'm going to hand it off to Richard and Dara to get things started.
Okay. How many people here have ever heard of Interlink? How many of you are from DoD? Okay. Interestingly enough, Interlink does all these things, all these enterprise services, and anybody in DoD can use them for free. And yet, people in DoD keep going out and building their own version. Example, I'm not endorsing a product. SharePoint, at every single classification level in the government, is available for free. All you got to do is log on and build your SharePoint site. So in any event, so what's my interest here? Why am I here? I actually am not an IT guy. I'm a counterintelligence, counterterrorism guy who got asked to go and run some troubled programs and then was asked to go start running Interlink to try to get it focused on supplying the right kinds of things to end users in the most cost-effective way we could get it done. I'm down with the Army right now on a rotational assignment. Most of y'all have probably heard of joint duty type rotational assignments, so I'm on a joint duty rotational to help the Army as they move their largest single command from Belvoir to Huntsville, Alabama, and stand up an operations center that has to have operational awareness across the entire globe 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And they have 70,000 people. They're deployed in 153 countries, every state in the United States, and they have to be able to monitor everything that is going on in their enterprise. So if a soldier wears it, shoots it, eats it, sleeps on it, consumes it in some way, and even many other cabinet departments who have operations overseas, they are dependent upon the Army Materiel Command for everything from moving household goods to ammunition. So if you see things like cruise missiles and other things, that ammunition is all supplied by the Joint Munitions Command, which is one of the subordinate commands of the Army Materiel Command. So they have high complexity in what they have to bring together in the way of information in that command and be able to make rapid decisions, because ultimately on the battlefield today it is decision dominance that predicts the outcome, because we have few near peers in the world in terms of kinetic capability, but where the enemy seeks advantage is they seek to beat us in making decisions. If they can move faster and more agilely than we can, then they have a tactical advantage. But when we look across in the future, one of the other things I happen to do is I try to look at where we're going. And most of you probably haven't really thought about where we'll be in 5 years, where we'll be in 10. How soon will you see people walking around with a mobile device on which they are receiving top secret information? It's technologically capable today. You can do it. The only thing standing in the way is people's policy and procedure ties to the past that try to force us to continue in the old way. And so that's inertia. But I think when we look at the environment at the unclassified level in the federal government, for those of you who haven't looked me up on Wikipedia or Google, I helped found the Department of Homeland Security.
Wow.
I was the first director of an office in the government for information sharing and collaboration, and the team I led wrote the doctrine upon which all the information sharing and collaboration principles are now founded. So, but it's looking toward that future. How can you have distributed information and access and collaboration tools and have the appropriate level of security based on what the person's involved in? Because it's a little different for law enforcement versus people that are in the medical field versus people who are engaged in high levels of citizen interface where they have to be providing services, communication, and so forth with the general public. And so how do you amalgamate those things and make yourself able to do them? I personally believe, and several people with whom I've spoken at the senior level believe, that we are rapidly moving to the point where you will have most government employees will wander around with an iPad-type device. They won't sit in an office. They won't have a main computer that is hooked up. If you believe OMB and GSA and others, you know, within the next 5 years, 35 to 40% of your workforce will only come to the office occasionally. They will work from their house. And you will be required to supply the IT connectivity and services that allow that to happen. And so when we look at that environment, you have to you got to think about it. And it's interesting because I have a daughter who is employed by a company in Reston, Virginia, and she works from her house in Huntsville, Alabama, and none of her clients know she's not in Reston because her cell phone, that is her main communication device, still has a 703 area code. Okay? And her mailing address is still Reston, Virginia, but all the mail comes to the house in Huntsville, Alabama. My son-in-law, her husband, who works for a commercial bank, has a T1 line run to their house and does all of his business for that commercial bank from his house. And yet none of his clients across the entire East Coast know that he's in Huntsville, Alabama. They all think he's in Reston, Virginia. And so ultimately, that's the kind of world, if you think about that as a microcosm of the commercial world, that's where we're headed as a government. And so the purpose of talking today is to talk a little bit about the Wild West world that we find ourselves in, because I really believe that this is going to, what this is actually going to hinge on is whether government persons and our contractor partners can envision that future and figure out how to secure these devices and secure the environment and protect the information that they need to protect across that kind of a highly distributed mobile environment. And I'm actually one of those people who thinks, why, if in the federal government we spend $80 billion a year on IT, why do we not have a federal department for IT instead of individual IT departments in every organization? Throughout this entire conference, I've listened to people talk about the problems between one agency and another when it comes to setting up programs. So why is it that we do not have one consolidated federal Department of Information Technology, and if you have IT, it comes from them? And by doing that, you would take away all the policy hurdles and difficulties from agency to agency to agency. So that's my futuristic thinking. So I'm going to kind of turn it over to Dara to give her opening remarks.
Good morning, everyone. For those of you that have looked me up on Wikipedia, I've been approached a couple times, so I'll just say this. And one of the things that in the intro didn't say in the bio, but I have been approached, is that contrary to popular belief of little free time I have, I'm not following Bob Dylan around, and I'm not doing headliners with my electric guitar, but not to say that's not a bad thing. Because that probably would make me more interesting, wouldn't it? We've heard quite a few things, a lot of different sessions about the cloud. We were going to do a PowerPoint on the cloud, but I didn't want to do any kind of death by PowerPoint. So I'm going to speak to you on a researcher's perspective of the cloud and sort of open it up, be very interactive with you about what your concerns are regarding the cloud environment. I do have to say the following disclaimer, just based on work for HHS, but any of the comments or statements that I make are on behalf of Dara Murray and not on behalf of HHS. That's a requirement from our public relations office, so I have to make that statement specifically since we're on tape there. With that, I'm going to speak to you quite a bit about the cloud computing environment and discussion about, it's not a new concept. You've probably all heard of the concept of rebranding, right? That's what cloud computing is. It's not a new concept. We've been doing virtualization and sharing of services and infrastructure and applications for years. So now we've come out with a really cool term called the cloud. So, but there's many, security issues with that. One of the things I just sort of wanted to state in the actual the subject matter for our what it says today about a hostile environment, growing a hostile environment. I think that's a very strong term, hostile. I think the word should be challenging. That's what we've heard quite a few times. It's a very challenging environment and how we're meeting those challenges. And we're going to talk to you a little bit about today about those challenges, get your perspective, and see what your concerns are. But with that, we're going to start off with a video that Rick's going to show on the AV, and then we'll get into more discussion.
There has been a shift in usage regarding mobile devices in the personal computing space. Mobile computing has become standard. It is common to see tablets and other mobile devices hooked to public Wi-Fi hotspots as today's users maintain productivity on the go. Many users now consider their mobile phone to be their primary work device. A survey by McAfee revealed a surprising 4 out of 10 mobile users employ their personal phone as their primary work device. Given this shift, it becomes necessary to underscore a change in our thinking on device management. Some alarming statistics illustrate where we are vulnerable today. 74% of users do not consider their mobile device to be a risk. 84% of users are unaware their mobile device can transmit confidential data without their knowledge. Approximately 20% of users store credit card details, passwords, and PIN codes on their phones. And a shocking 51% of mobile users employ no basic keypad or password lock despite the information stored on their devices. This is particularly worrisome since roughly 4,400 smartphones were left in airports last year, most of which were never reported lost or stolen. The steady advance of readily available hacker tools and those willing to exploit them has changed the threat landscape. Malicious users only need to utilize easily downloaded apps to do their dirty work. Sadly, technology is not the only access point for intrusions into your private mobile space, and these intrusions endanger more than just your personal information. The idea that state-sponsored hacker networks are targeting only governments and big corporations is wrong. These criminal networks aren't interested in compiling personal data for targeted advertising. They wanted to build a bigger picture and identify new insertion points. Activist hacker collectives like Anonymous are also a threat. They target unwary users in order to create an insertion point into an employer's data. Recent intrusions, such as the HP Gary breach, illustrate that these hackers are increasingly targeting DoD and other security entities. Finally, there are the casual hackers, known as app kiddies, who employ a rudimentary amount of knowledge and utilize open Wi-Fi connections to hijack web sessions, gaining access to your personal device and personal information. The most common of which are infected or poorly written mobile applications available on mobile app stores. In March of 2011 alone, over 58 malicious apps were found on the Android market, where they were downloaded to over 260,000 devices before the apps were removed by Google. Legitimate apps can also introduce vulnerabilities to your mobile device. Little or no encryption makes it easy to intercept data over the network, and many apps don't encrypt your username and password. Social media and financial applications were the worst offenders. Another method employed by attackers is called malvertising. A malicious user purchases advertising space on a legitimate website or mobile app. When a user clicks the advertisement, they are directed to a malicious app, browser, or operating system exploit. This is executed by a drive-by download, which is an unintended download of software from the internet. Connecting to a public Wi-Fi is also a high-risk activity due to the open transmission nature of unsecured Wi-Fi. Mobile devices are an easy target due to the amount of information they store. Some phones are equipped with near-field communications for mobile payments, home security systems, and cars, so your phone is also your wallet, house, and car keys. You take all of these elements into account and you get subversive multi-vector threats. This is where people, processes, and technology are all assessed equally. SMV is now the most common attack method. Attackers are targeting the ignorance of users more than technological vulnerabilities. Many tools exist to exploit the vulnerabilities present in today's mobile devices. The use of these tools for anything other than their intended purpose is illegal and punishable by law. The Android Network Toolkit app allows an attacker to press a button and search an open Wi-Fi network for potential targets, or take control of a PC by taking advantage of vulnerabilities in older software. The FaceNet Session Jacker hijacks an active Facebook session taking place over a Wi-Fi connection and steals the session keys, granting access to the user's session. This tool works as long as the hacker can gain access to the Wi-Fi connection, whether it is a public or private hotspot. Another tool is Mobile Spy, which runs as a hidden background process and records virtually all activity on your phone, storing it in a database for online access. This tool records SMS, calls, contact, and GPS logs, as well as access to emails, calendar, tasks, and memos. iLocallis is very similar to Mobile Spy. It too runs as a hidden background process and records activity on your phone. But, unlike Mobile Spy, iLocallis has the ability to record audio by turning your phone into an audio bug, whether you are making a call or not. Mobile devices are vulnerable to malicious attacks, but methods exist for mitigating your risks and securing your mobile device against intrusion. First, be sure to familiarize yourself with the built-in security features present on your device and take advantage of them. Passcode lock your device. Most casual thieves are deterred by this first hurdle. Limit the amount of personal information you store on your device. If it isn't available, it can't be stolen. Turn off GPS location and Bluetooth services if you aren't using them. Use an Exchange account for email, contacts, and calendars. This gives you the ability to easily change your password should your device be compromised. Update your phone's operating system regularly. Carefully consider which apps to install before installing them. If you no longer need the app, be sure to uninstall it. And monitor app permissions closely. Be wary of apps containing foreign characters in the title or description. Be cautious of connecting to public Wi-Fi hotspots, and be careful of the information you transmit over the connection. Your mobile device is particularly vulnerable to session hackers. Make use of device tracking services such as MobileMe from Apple to easily track and remote lock or wipe your device should it be lost or stolen. The 4G network is also expanding the availability of cloud computing. More and more users have the ability to upload information for storage in the cloud. This will help secure data, but it presents a new set of challenges and should be used with care. Finally, remember to keep your personal hotspot secure. Use WPA2 encryption on your home Wi-Fi. Now we see the current risks that exist for mobile security, we need to start looking ahead. As mobile users, we must be vigilant and turn our focus to secure mobile computing.
Did you like that?
All right, that is approved for public release. We actually play that on the flat panel TVs in the hallways of our headquarters. I have left this copy with the sponsors of the conference here, so if any of y'all want to get a hold of it, I'm sure you can. Feel free to use it in your own agency. And what I would tell you is that, what's the purpose? I believe the key component is making the users aware and helping them to learn what they can do to mitigate the risks, because we're all in the risk mitigation business if we're trying to secure a highly mobile environment. But with that, I'll turn it over to Dara.
Thank you, Rick. One of the things that I was asked to talk a little bit about, and it scopes in mobile devices, the cloud environment. We are HHS is a information system security line of business, and we're one of the only 5 agencies that provide the whole gamut. We take into consideration looking at your environment, the cloud computing environment, mobile devices, if that's what you want us to look at. And we provide approval to operate services under the ISSLOB. We're working with GSA. GSA did a lot of discussions about the cloud environment and how you can use the FedRAMP and the services and so forth. So we're working a great deal with GSA and hopefully in a partnership to ensure that services such as a cloud computing environment, when you're implemented into your environment, is implemented securely. Remember, I said I was going to speak to you based on a researcher's perspective about the cloud environment. The field of cloud computing is still in its infancy, and as far as implementation and usage, partly because it is heavily promoted by technology advancement and is so high resource dependent that researchers in academic institutions have not had many opportunities to analyze and experiment with it. At the moment, a general understanding of cloud computing refers to the following: grid computing, utility computing, software as a service, we've heard about that, storage in the cloud, and virtualization. The current view, critics argue that cloud computing is not secure enough. That's one of the things that we're all very concerned about because data leaves the company's local area networks. We heard a little bit yesterday in Peter Mell's session that he was a moderator about the concerns that you have about you're not close to the pin anymore as far as what you have in your environment, and you're putting it out there to an organization or a cloud environment that you don't really understand or know whether that's secure. But it's up to the clients to decide, the vendors, depending on how willing they are to implement security policies and be subject to third-party verifications. Again, I'm not endorsing any particular companies, but Salesforce, Amazon, and Google are currently providing such services, charging clients. For those of you that had children, you know the term on-demand feeding. Yes, okay. So that's on-demand policy. Did some research. Eleanor Mills references statistics that suggest 1/3 of breaches are due to laptops falling in the wrong hands, and about 16% due to stolen items by employees. Storing the data in the cloud can prevent these issues altogether. Vendors can update applications and operating system middleware security patches faster because it is higher availability of staff and resources. According to cloud vendors, most thefts occur because of higher availability of staff resources. Upon logout from a cloud session, the browser may be configured to delete data automatically, and log files on the vendor side indicate which user accessed the data. There are some applications for which cloud computing is the best option. One of the things I was going to stick up on my slides, and just want to let you know that the discussion in some of my PowerPoint will be on the GTRA, website. There are some applications such as, there's an example, the New York Times, and this is where we get into the security and cost issues. Using Amazon's cloud service to generate PDF documents of several decade-old articles. The estimated time for doing the task on the Times servers was 14 years, whereas the cloud provided the answer in, anybody want to guess? 1 day and a couple $100. How can you beat it, okay? So that, you know, it's definitely a concern as far as being able to hand over the security, the data, and ensuring that it is secure. In the last session, they discussed about innovation. There are numerous ways in which cloud computing can expand on issues of security. Again, not endorsing any products, but QualisGuard, via compilation of products, are used to discover network weaknesses, used over 200 companies. In Forbes Global 2000 has acquired significant acceptance in the marketplace. So, so that's you know, one of the things that you need to take into consideration. Academia, industry partners, I didn't really hear a lot of discussion about this, so I'm just going to talk about it briefly. The Open Cloud Consortium, OCC, is a group formed by universities and IT companies looking to investigate new ways of improving computing and storage costs across various cloud platforms and integrate communication standards among different providers. The OCC has undertaken the following goals: development of standards for cloud computing and frameworks for interoperating between clouds, develop benchmarks for cloud computing, support reference implementations for cloud computing, preferably open source reference implementations, manage a testbed for cloud computing and open cloud testbed, and sponsor workshops at other events like these related to cloud companies. We talked about hostile, and let's talk about challenges. Challenges that computing currently faces in being deployed in large enterprise scale. One of the terms is self-healing. In case of application network data storage failure, there will always be backup running without major delays, making the resource switch appear seamless to the user. SLA delivery. We talked a little bit about this yesterday. I've heard some issues about service level agreements, MOUs. That is one area that is lacking in the implementation of a cloud environment that we have to really do a better job in. The cloud is administered by service level agreements that allow several instances of one application to be implemented on multiple servers if needed arises, depending on a priority scheme. So that's one of the areas that we really need to do a little better on. Another security challenges. Startup companies often lack the protection measures to weather off an attack on the servers due to the scarcity of resources. Poor programming that explores software vulnerabilities, some technical terms, PHP, JavaScript, open ports to firewalls, or inexistent load balance algorithms susceptible to denial of service attacks. So for this reason, new companies are encouraged to pursue cloud computing as the alternative to support their own hardware backbone. Cloud computing does not come without pitfalls. For starters, a cloud is a single point of failure. That is everybody's concern for multiple resources. Even though network carriers, won't mention which ones, believe a distributed cloud structure is the right implementation, it faces challenges in finding the optimal approach for lower power transmission, higher network availability. Some people believe that major corporations will shy away from implementing cloud solutions in the future due to ineffective security policies. We have to have very, very secure and very stringent security policies. Since we just got the high sign there, I'm just going to make it quick so I can turn it over to Rick and he can talk a little bit about more of his implementation. Data security, confidentiality, availability, and integrity are those the three areas that we have to be very concerned about. My first job at NRC, my supervisor said, if you want to act smart about security, those are the three things. If you're in a room full of security professionals, always talk about those three things, because that's everybody's concern. Confidential refers to who stores the encryption keys. Data from a company is stored in encrypted format. Is a concern. Integrity refers to the face that no common policies exist for approved data exchanges. The industry has various protocols used to push different software images. And lastly, the most problematic is availability. As several companies using cloud computing have already experienced downtime, other things to keep in mind are contract policies between clients and vendors so that data belongs only to the client at all times, preventing third parties to be involved at any point. So this concern about availability seems to be a big issue. Just going to scope down here about, did some research about what Gartner has identified, 7 issues that need to be addressed before enterprises consider switching to a cloud computing model. 1, privileged user access. Information transmitted from the client through the internet poses a certain degree of risk. Because of issues of data ownership, enterprises should spend some time getting to know their providers and their regulations as much as possible before assigning some trivial applications to the test server. And test the water. Regulatory compliance, this is another big issue. Clients are accountable for the security of their solution as they choose between providers that allow it to be audited by third-party organizations that check levels of security. And providers that don't, data location depending on contracts. Some clients might never know what country or what jurisdiction their data is located. Data segregation. Encrypted information from multiple companies may be stored on the same hard disk, so the mechanism to separate data should be deployed by the provider. Recovery. Every provider should have a disaster recovery protocol to protect the user's data. Very, very important. Investigative support. Similar to what Rick has done and you just saw in the video. If a client suspects faulty activity from the provider, it may not have many legal ways to pursue an investigation. Again, those legal sanctions are a big concern. And the last, long-term viability, refers to the availability to retract a contract on all data if the current provider is bought out by another firm. So you have your data out there in a cloud, in a virtual environment, and then that provider may be bought out. What do you do? So that's some of the concerns that I've done, and I've done some research on that I've heard. We've heard a lot about pushing the cloud in the last few sessions, and security issues and cost recovery. Cloud is a very good initiative and perspective if it is implemented securely and correctly. So that's sort of what I was just going to, sort of discuss about the security issues and the concerns I've done some research on, and the concerns that I've heard that you would have as far as implementing a cloud environment before, you just want to save money, but you have to take that in perspective that it is a security issue. Rick?
Okay, I'll make a couple of remarks. I think, most people have COOP plans. We spend a lot of money in our government on COOP. One of the significant advantages to cloud computing is if your contract agreement calls for the distribution of the data in multiple centers so that no more than 20% of the information or applications are in any one center, then the likelihood that you would lose more than 20% of your computing power and data at any one time is so extremely remote that it would serve the purpose of COOP, and you could recoup all that money to apply to that contract and that problem. The second piece, I think Dara's conversation was very well placed. I'll give you an example. One of the last things I did before leaving to go to the work with the Army was I was asked by the White House to come to a meeting where they were talking about creating an environment where people in Afghanistan that were both U.S. people and foreigners, foreign military, non-governmental organizations could securely communicate by email, share documents, gain access to certain data that would be posted. DISA was going to provide it. They said they could do it in 4 years for $4 million. And I told them I could provide it in less than 90 days, fully operationally capable for under $1 million. And we did it. And we used a cloud solution provider. The only glitch we ran into was we figured out when we were doing the testing on the servers that the security of the cloud provider was so full of holes, it was like Swiss cheese. So we had to help them, and there was a little bit of an emotional struggle there because they didn't want to give us access to their root information, and we had to have that in order to do the information assurance and certification and accreditation. But we got over that hurdle, and we delivered it on time. It's in operation today. It's called PIX, which is a Protected Internet Exchange. So what's the point? There are many advantages to cloud computing. Some of the things that she pointed out from the Gartner study are very critical, because somebody once asked me, what's the difference between Wikipedia and Intellipedia? Why do you make people log in? Why do you track what somebody's done? And it's really basic. We're the government. We actually are liable for what's on our system that may be inaccurate. Okay, so we have to be careful. Wikipedia doesn't have to worry about that. So it's a kind of a similar thing that what information and data is there, how it's protected, particularly if it's citizen data, is very, very critical when you look at these things. But kind of going back to taking a look, I was very gratified to hear some of the previous conversations in panels about cloud computing and about the efforts that cloud providers are making to open up as we've gotten more into this, to cooperate and be a partner on how they do security in the cloud.
Well, caveat what you just said, Rick, is that I was very happy to hear the last presentation from GSA that they are making the CNA available for all of you to review, because they're holding that very tightly. And that's one of the things that we absolutely need to see, so that we don't have to do waste a lot of money doing our own implementation of a approval to operate. We just look at those specific controls in the GSS and then be able to add to it. So I was really, happy to hear that that's more of an open implementation right now versus just having to do our own thing.
Yeah. So in any event, and I think that's a very good point. I mean, ultimately, it is that collaborative spirit, that ability to look at what we are each doing and sharing that information openly that allows us to accept, for instance, the ATO of one organization into another, the CNA from one organization to another. But I think that when you look at the environment, the reason I call it the growing hostile environment is that we have an unlimited number of state operators and non-state operators who are trying to gain access to data for various reasons. A substantial amount of that is completely legitimate. They just want to know everything you do, because if they do that, they can send you junk mail, send you discount certificates that cause you to go buy something. I don't know how many people here are kind of from the northeastern U.S. You kind of may have seen the commercials where years ago there was a lady who was on a commercial, and she held up the thing and said, I saved 20% and I saved 15%, and she went down and she said, I saved 100%. But anyway, but I mean, I think that I think what you have to look at, though, we are stewards of the taxpayers' resources. Everybody here is a taxpayer, okay? And at the same time, we are stewards of those taxpayers' resources. And the question is, do we think about the taxpayer and the impact first thing when we're considering what we're going to do? Or do we try to protect our own budgets, our own systems, our own structure, because that's where we live our life and that's how we gain our future? And what I would call upon you to do, whether you're government or whether you are one of our partners, is to think about that first. Because ultimately, where we're headed in this country, if you believe GAO, is to a position years from now where we will have to decide what the federal government won't do anymore for the citizens, because we won't have the revenue to pay the bills. And so what we do today can have an exponentially significant impact on how far out that point is away from here. So thinking about it from your perspective and mine, we should be good stewards. We should always be looking for the way to do it at the least cost impact with the most effectiveness in our security. And so the last but not least, new technologies. I've seen an awful lot of presentations here, talked to a lot of people about a lot of really great technological achievements and services that are available. But what about the technologies that you don't know about? If I could tell you that if anybody in your organization got up and walked away from their device, if they got more than so many feet away from the device, which you would determine what that distance was, that would automatically lock down the device, and it could not be used by anyone else, and if they tried to use it, it would wipe it with what you want wiped. And when the person walks back up, it instantly comes back on and they can use it just like they never left. Would you be interested in that kind of technology to secure your systems and your data? Okay, I've seen that device. I've watched it demonstrated. Okay? What if I told you there was a device that if installed, it can operate at the device level, the network level, or the enterprise level? And for instance, if you happen to have a counterfeit Cisco router that tries to phone home and send out data, it will stop it from doing it and notify you that the event just occurred and what the IP address is of the instrument that just tried to do it. Would you be interested in such a device to protect your networks and your enterprise? And so the astonishing thing is these devices are extremely cheap. And so the question is, I can't mention them publicly, but if somebody decides to contact me and talk to me about it, I'll talk to you about it offline once I check out who you are. But I mean, that's why when I look at it, I tell you that the future is going to be a mobile device that you can have as much control of as you need. And what you need is maximum feasible centralized control, but maximum feasible distributed or decentralized execution, so that the user can determine the things they need to do, and the IT professionals can take a look at whether it's a problem based on what everybody knows from the vendors and providers that we have with that kind of information, and make a rational decision about the risk based on what it is you do, what kind of information you handle on behalf of the government, and what you're trying to achieve in what timeline. Because what I have typically tried to explain to people is that the future, you know, I don't know how many of you may have heard of Clausewitz, but Clausewitz wrote a book called On War, in which he posited that having the critical mass at the critical place on the battlefield at the critical moment to affect the outcome of the battle was preeminent, and that all else in warfare and defense was secondary to that goal and had to serve that goal. But on the battlefield of the future, it'll be the ability to have the critical capability to disrupt the performance of someone else's systems and technology at the critical moment that will affect the outcome of the battle. So we are shifting from a world where the old thought, the old process about how we gain inertia as organizations and how we create value is going to shift from where you are today to a world where the ability for you to be able to access a human being and their brain resources wherever they are in the world at an instant to gain their perspective or the knowledge or the what they can bring to the battle for you as an agency is going to be the preeminent dominant factor in employment. And so as you think about this, as you look at it, go searching for those innovative, creative technologies. And guess what? Every single one of them is a small business entrepreneurial type enterprise. Okay? Every one of them I've seen that is a cutting edge technology for the future. Some of them are aligned with large scale integrators, and they're in partnership to work development. But I have not visited one single large scale integrator that has shown me a revolutionary, disruptive technology that was not from a small business. So I would tell you, look for the new innovative technologies. Create the little experiment within your organization to try it and test it and see if it'll do what they say, because you may be able to save yourself millions upon millions of dollars with a highly reliable technical solution that will solve many of the problems that you face as an enterprise. Dara?
I think I've said it before, implementing these technologies is a very good way to go, as long as they're implemented correctly, as far as infrastructure and securely. I think we've run out of time, but, I mean, we might be able to take a question or two,
Yeah.
or we'll be around.
Until they serve you lunch or whatever, feel free to ask some questions.
I think they did say we did start late, so we were like yielded 5 minutes or something, so we might be able to take some questions. Have any?
Richard, how do we get access to that video?
I actually provided it to GTRA. Where's Parham? Is he around? Somebody, can you, I believe they probably could make it available for you all to download.
Yeah, they're
so
going to put it
that
on the
you don't-
website with
Yeah,
my
they've got a
slides, too.
download site, so you ought to be able to go on their website and yes, sir. Yeah, and believe me, the memory sticks are all made in China. And they have a technology that'll phone home for you. But yeah, so, but, I mean, the video is available. I would encourage you to use it. Like I said, we try to remind our users every single day. The Army Materiel Command is actually, the whole facility is a secret open storage environment. And so we try to remind our users every day to be careful with their devices. It's nice when you can take a general and show them that since they have their own personal device and they have location on, that all that stuff they're doing to guard their itinerary and where they're going is irrelevant, because the enemy can track every place they are on the planet. So anyway, other questions?
Okay, well, thank you very much for your time.
Yeah, thanks so
Yeah.
much.
Great job.